Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. It's been a decently quiet week in EVE Online, especially when it comes to news from CCP, but if you are curious about what's going to happen, do take a look at the EVE Online updates website. It looks like we are getting some graphics upgrades for miners. Well, that's coming out of left field. Some improvements to the activity tracker and then also sort of a protection from a skill extraction, which should automatically kick in whenever you change a password or something like that on your account, which should give you like this extra layer in case of a hacked account so that you don't lose everything that way. Next up here, we are going to take a quick look at the new Eden store because there is a new skin out. It's called the Lava Core Imperial skin. I think it looks pretty cool, especially here on the Confessor. Look at that with the animated top up here. That's really cool. It's decently shining as well. I think the battleships look very nice, but what's gonna be really popular, I think, look at that Avatar Lava Core Imperial skin. I think that's going to be a popular one. It's very beautiful, definitely unique compared to the others. A nice combination of yellow, red, orangey, a lava color, and then the dark there. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think this one is going to be quite popular. It is pretty expensive, 700 plex for the Avatar Lava Core skin. You also have a bundle for 780, but a pretty cool looking skin in my opinion. Yeah, definitely one that I think we'll see being flown, especially as I've said from the Supercap pilots. I think that if you want to look unique and cool, this is gonna be one that they'll go for. Other than that, yeah, not too much news there, except that the fireworks are no longer front and center. This means that we are at the end of the holidays and hopefully CCP can go into full gear when it comes to development, but also communication. It is something that I'm missing a little bit, and I am personally quite curious to see how CCP is going to communicate, like big updates and big plans for the game when they don't have their yearly FanFest in Iceland anymore. It's now going to be like a world tour with all types of, popular FanFest meetings or EVE Online meetings where the devs will be more active and more present, like Amsterdam and EVE London, probably EVE Down Under and things like that as well. So I'm really curious to see how the communication is going to be done this year, because it will be quite different from what we're used to. Let's move on to the actual market then. As always, we'll start with some plex and stuff at 255. Like that. Let's start with those plex, and you can see that here in GTA 3,445,000 ISK. Now that is going up, so if we look at the chart, upwards pressure has taken over. We're not at a 1 year high yet, but we're definitely super close to that at this point. A bit of a surprise to me personally. I thought that we would see the opposite type of movement on plex. I think that we did see that increased volume here, especially right during the holidays, mid-December up until now the first week of January pretty much, and at the end here volumes decreasing, prices going back up. So I guess that people are now no longer interested in spending their Christmas money on plex in EVE Online, and thus the in-game demand starts to take over. That could be what is happening here, of course. That is the one thing that's I think pretty unique to plex compared to most of the other goods in EVE Online. It does have that very strong correlation also between what happens in the real life economy, real life world, and yeah, something to keep in mind as well. So here for sellers, 3,444,000 in GTA itself. If we look at the player-owned trade hubs though, just below 3.4 million ISK, and the buyers are at 3.3 million ISK for plex. Next up, we have the multiple pallet train certificate, and that is pretty damn interesting. Volumes a little bit down, but definitely on the normal front, and look at that, straight up to a 1 year high point, 1.5 billion almost on the chart here, and selling now for practically 1.5 billion. In fact, almost 50 million more than that in GTA itself, and 1.4 billion for the buyers here. Comes as a bit of a surprise, but it also shows that patience is a virtue when it comes to the market, because you know, we had some good buys here at a billion or below a billion as well, which we definitely spotted as opportunities to buy the multiple pirate trading certificate. And then we always had these 1.25 billion tops here that always were like, yeah, you can probably sell if you want to, but this is what we would have been should have been waiting for, of course, an actual breakout. It takes a medium turn, right? We're talking about half a year to even 10 months before it actually materializes here, but then you would have had a trade of a purchase less than a billion and then now selling at 1.5 billion. Nice 50% profit that you can still take in the multiple pirate trading certificate. But yeah, patience is key also when it comes to some of your investments, of course. Next up, the skill extractors, a bit more hesitant than Plex. That is quite interesting. So the breakout here is pretty massive. In Plex, we do clearly have an uptrend yet again that if it has any momentum is going to reach a new 1-year high point. But skill extractors, while they're up as well, they're also like a little bit muted, and at the tail end we're seeing a little bit of hesitation here. So these are now selling for 378 million ISK in the player owned trade ups, 388 in GTA itself, and 370 for the buyers. Narrow margin, so definitely lots of demand pushing the prices back up here. For the injectors, let's start with the large skill injectors. Finally, the top has been reached. So about 10 days ago to a week ago, this would have been the perfect time to sell. 860 million was definitely possible, but obviously, it was a pretty special time as well. Perhaps the exact same thing could be said here as for Plex, that people were interested in the large scale injectors a little bit more as well because of the holidays. But of course, we have the gifts that CCP gave out with that special booster that allowed you to use 3 large scale injectors without having the drawbacks, regardless of how many SP you already have. And that is going to have boosted the popularity of the large scale injectors to a peak. They are now costing 833 million ISK. We're talking almost 850 in GTA still, but 811 for the buyers. So here we definitely have a dip in demand for large scale injectors after people have consumed that free SP. Well, it's not free SP, but that unrestricted SP from that booster, I think. Next up, we have the small scale injector that is showing a little bit of the same pattern here. And trying to land, I think, at 170, 171 for the sellers and 165 for the buyers. Very narrow margin, so here the market is definitely not saying, well, we don't want small scale injectors anymore, but there is a little bit of a drawback in tandem with the large scale injectors, which is normal, of course. If I'm not mistaken, you basically divide a large scale injector into several small scale injectors. So even if the actual impact happened here, because of course, who is going to use that booster on small scale injectors? No one is going to do that. So demand for large scale injectors increased quite a lot. That always has an impact on the small scale injectors. And finally, we have the daily alpha injectors that are trying to normalize, getting back towards 50 million. But as I've said here, we have this huge CCP sale that dropped the price to 35 million. We're now selling at 51 million and 48 million for the buyers. So obviously, demand is back up and supply is going down. As a result, the price is trying to normalize, but we're not there yet. And here I would again caution for that exact same thing. Have enough patience. If you manage to buy for these for less than 40 million ISK, sure, this seems like an okay trade. 25% increase in price is not bad, but then remember the multiple pilot trade certificates 1, 2, 3 sell opportunities that looked okay. But here is the real one finally happening here mid-January. So yeah, for the daily alpha injectors, if you did make a move on this dip here, I personally would say have enough patience, wait for that 60 million so that you have like almost a 50% markup. A lot better than 25, which you have now. We're clearly still at the lower end of the normal chart for the daily alpha injectors. Next up, we have some minerals coming in at 930. Like that, and we're gonna try not to forget Morphite. In fact, we're gonna just switch it around because I forgot about Morphite last week. I'm constantly thinking, because I think it's because I'm doing some industry myself, and so I'm doing Tech 1 stuff, so my focus is on all the other minerals, and as a result I forgot to cover Morphite. Here is Morphite, 8000 is staying below that. Compared to this entire chart, still a pretty good time to be buying. 7,800 for the sellers and 7,628 for the buyers. That is obviously, historically speaking, and on this 1 year chart, a pretty damn low price. I do think that this is the right time to try and grab some of that morphite below 8,000 ISK, and you can clearly see here August, that was due to a war. I think this spike here as well, whenever Tech 2 ships get blown up in large numbers, you will see an impact on morphite because it is needed for Tech 2 production, and so you are dependent on something happening in Nosik, but we are clearly talking about 1 year low points here, and a nice opportunity to grab morphite for less than 8,000 ISK. Moving on to the Tech 1s, we have Tritanium staying pretty flat, trying to stay above 4.5 ISK, so that's not so bad. And sellers in JITA are coming in at 478. But you do see that massive volume still coming in, 2 billion, 1.2 billion, another billion, another 1.5 billion. It's just a lot of tritanium that is still coming in. Buyers at 449, trying to get the price below 4.5 ISK, but it does look like the market is not really willing to sell tritanium below that price at the moment. You get this pretty obvious seesaw that keeps bouncing whenever we break or get close to 4.5 ISK. Next up, we've got pyrite. After that little resurgence, I mean, it's still a pretty terrible price, staying below 4 ISK, but it is managing to maintain 3.4 to 5 ISK for now. 377 for the sellers, 371 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin. We do have a billion here, half a billion, couple more of those sell orders as well, so people are trying to take advantage of this slightly better price, but it's still pretty damn terrible actually, and I'm not sure if I would be willing to sell pyrite at this price myself. In fact, seeing my results at the moment in industry, I'd rather just put it in some ammo and get like a 50 to 100% markup. At the moment it's selling really well in JITA, and so I personally think that there's better use for pyrite that you've mined than to sell it on the market at the moment. Next up, we have Mexlon, a little bit of an uptick as well, but staying below 60 ISK, so this is definitely still at the lower end of the chart. 59.91 for the sellers, 55.88 for the buyers. That's pretty obviously still very much under pressure, but that little uptick means that we're no longer at the 1 year low point, and there might be some rumblings in Nosik. I did read or see, I didn't actually read up on it, but I did see a thread on Reddit that there was like a pretty big fight involving Test that happened with quite a few losses. That may explain that little bump in Mexlon, because the pattern I think is still holding up, that Mexlon is the bottleneck for Nosik local mining. If you're trying to produce everything from your own systems, you're gonna run out of Mexlon first. Next up, we have Isogen, continuing that slow uptrend, so trying to get away from that 15 ISK and very slowly doing so. Sellers are at 1742, buyers at 1663. It is definitely a pretty unique movement. If we look at tritanium, you can see the seesaw movement. If you look at pyrite, you can see a nice little move up, and on Mexlon, still a little bit of a move up here. Isogen, very slow and steady, 20-day moving average, 5-day moving average, and the daily average is just slowly drifting up from 15 ISK to the current price range. Quite unusual, not something that we see quite often. You do see some volume spikes, and that makes this all the weirder. You have people that are buying, what would that be, 10-15 times the normal daily volumes, and yet the price just slowly goes back up. It does, in my opinion, mean that Isogen is by far the most overproduced mineral that we're having at the moment, and so even big investments in volumes are not having a big impact on the price. Does that mean that it's an actual opportunity to buy lots of it? Who knows? If it is indeed the worst mineral in the game, perhaps this is one that CCP might look into at some point, but you will still be dependent on either something really big happening in Nosik or a CCP intervention, I think, to make investments that you're making here pay off. After that, we have Noxium. That's bad news for Noxium. Dipping below 300 ISK is not a good sign. Managing again for November and December to really try and stay above that 300 ISK, especially here in December, did really well. Yearly result is also not bad. Definitely one that has been able to hold on to that 300 ISK for a long time. but now selling for 313. You can see that we are coming under pressure here. 288 for the buyers. That pressure is probably going to keep mounting unless we of course do see pyrite a bump up, Mexilon a small bump up, Isogen a steady increase in price, and Tritanium managing to hold on with a couple of bumps as well. Perhaps there is enough happening in Nosik now to push Noxium back above 300 disc and hopefully stay there. It would be nice. I would be very hesitant at the moment to say that you should be mining for Noxium, but if you do have sources of Mexilon and Noxium, those are definitely the two ones that you should prioritize if you're mining in HiSec. And then we have Zydrine that is shooting up to 600 disc all of a sudden. 600 for the sellers and 593 for the buyers. Very unusual movement here, but of course we should remember that late November we did reach a 1 year low point of 400 discs. That's already a 50% increase in price here in 1.5 months, showing that Zydrine, Megasite are still somewhat of unique minerals, although we can't qualify them anymore as nullsic materials or nullsic minerals because you can easily mine them in 0.5 systems. They do still seem to be somehow the ones that make the bigger wavy movements. It's actually investment worthy, right? Look at this downtrend chart. I was very hesitant myself. I didn't make a move on Zydrine. But it looks like I should have. Could have bought these for 400 disc, and now you're selling them for 600 disc. And then for Megasite, you've got the same pattern, although feels like it's a little bit more steady and slow. It went down to 378, and you're now selling that for 574. So there was a bit of a trade to be made in Megasite and Zydrine. Definitely a pattern that we need to keep in mind whenever we again see them dive down to 1 year lows. That could be an interesting one, because this is definitely, and with the volumes here, something that you could have taken advantage of. Moving on to PI next at 17 minutes. I see it tick over, so we'll use it. Broadcast nodes, let's take a look at that. After trying to get back to 2.1 million a couple of times in December and early January, it's back down and now bouncing back off of the 2 million mark again. So it's 2 million, 50 million up to 2.1 million for the sellers and just a little bit below 2 million for the buyers. It's basically the buyers that are not budging. This does, in my opinion, indicate that we don't have strong enough demand to get prices back to average or above average. We're still below average for broadcast nodes. Construction blocks, same thing, keeps dipping to 10,000 disc and then bouncing back up, I think. So we've got 11,000 for the sellers, 10,400 for the buyers, but yeah, buyers are, there's not enough of them to bring construction blocks back to 12,000 average or something like that. So again, selling below average, also one of the goods that I managed to grab as an investment myself. I bought construction blocks for less than 10,000 disc. So I could sell them for 11k. That's only 10%. I'm gonna wait for a better sell opportunity on this one. Consumer electronics dropping off a cliff all of a sudden. Very interesting. 11,000 on the chart, 12,000 for the sellers, 10,125 for the buyers. If you're looking to buy some PI materials that are obviously at 1 year low points, consumer electronics are the ticket. Definitely a possibility for me personally. This chart is just too violent all of a sudden. 1 year low, 10,200 for the buyers. That's down here on the chart. I think if you can grab some of that, it will make you money at some point. Coolants are continuing their very strong push. So the big difference here, first three tied to production of goods or production of structures, coolants tied to production of fuels, and these are doing really well. Again, very close to a 1 year high point, just shy of 12,000 disc, 12,150 to 200 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. Really great price for coolants. Enriched uranium, it's also fuel related, but this one is the first one to buckle under the pressure. We must say though, 14,000 disc is a great price, 1 year high point for 2 months. That's almost unsustainable. We are now dipping to 12,000 disc, which even looking at this 1 year chart is still above average, and 13,650 to 900 for the sellers is a great price. 12,900 for the buyers is still above average price as well. So still doing decently well on enriched uranium. Integrity response drones is more of the bad news. Advanced PI is used in structures. The demand just isn't there, and so here we are again, I think, seeing the same pattern. 2.3 million for the sellers, but 2.1 million for the buyers is below most of the chart, indicating that the demand just isn't there at the moment. Next up, we have mechanical parts, also fuel related, but showing the first signs that things are changing there. So coolants still doing really well, but definitely a trend break. Mechanical parts definitely a trend break here as well on the downtrend. Heading for 10,000 disc on the chart. Sellers are at 10,800 above average. Buyers at 10,155. Just a touch above average. We could say that on this chart 10,000 disc is going to be the average for mechanical parts for the year. So here still a bit above average, but it's pretty obvious that things are changing, and that's actually not that much of a surprise. If you look at construction blocks now, 3-4 months below average, broadcast nodes not making it happen either. Well, people are going to end up switching some production from those goods to coolants, to enriched uranium, probably the best margin at 14k, and then the mechanical parts as well. So I'm basically, what I'm seeing here is that supply is starting to even out, and in my opinion it is people switching from some of the terribly performing goods to the better performing PI goods. Nuclear reactors staying, well, seesawing between 90 and 100,000 disc. I've got a small investment of that, 99,000 for the sellers, 84,000 still for the buyers. Again, showing that lack of demand in anything that's not related to fuels, and as a result, below average prices. Organic mortar applicators managing to stay at 1.1 million. Let's take a look at the sellers here again. Sellers 1.1 million, a bit above that, but buyers below 1 million ISK, again showing that lack of demand. Robotics is related to fuels, did dip to a pretty low point here to 92,000 ISK, but is already moving on its way back up. 99 to 100,000 for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers. Around average, a normal price, maybe a touch below, no actually, yeah, a touch below average here for robotics at the moment. Self-harmonizing power cores, again, look at that, most of the chart 2.1 to 2.2 million, here now 2 million to 2.1 million, and 2.1 for the sellers, the guilty party, less than 2 million for the buyers. It's really the lack of demand that is putting that pressure here. Superconductors, very unusual and interesting chart, keeps dipping to 11,000 ISK and then keeps shooting back up to 13 to 14,000 ISK here. 1, 2, 3, 4 peaks in a row. 13,000 still for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers. Here we do apparently have this strange dynamic where, well, either demand or supply keeps coming in, or demand drops off, and then we get well below average prices, even data points at 1 year lows of around 11,000 ISK, and then all of a sudden a massive resurgence back to 13-14k. Very unusual to see 4 peaks in less than 3 months, but here we go. Superconductors quite volatile at the moment. Test cultures dipping to less than 8,000 ISK, not staying there for very long, 8,300 for the sellers, but buyers 7,700. You can see that we don't even fill the whole page with buyers. This is again showing that lack of demand. And finally, wetware mainframes, trying to get back to 2.4 million, so that one is doing a little bit better with 2.4 on the sellers and 2.3 on the buyers. But the trend is obvious. Fuel-related PI still above average to very strong with coolants, but I think that production is starting to switch to those, and the others unfortunately below average, showing a clear lack of demand. Next up we have the advanced moon materials coming in at 23.50. Like that. Most of these are off their lows, but still not in an interesting sell territory in my opinion. So here we get crystalline carbonite staying very flat here below 175. So that's a big no, right? See buyers below 150, that would be interesting, but they're at 160, so that's a no for me. Fernite carbide does touch and even break 150, but the latest data points are at 160, so I think that we're basically just too late. 160 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. A couple of days ago, we could probably have grabbed some of this at less than 150. Next up, we have titanium carbide. That is breaking 200 disc on the upside, so if you did buy on this dip very specifically and you have enough patience, so you bought at 150, you're now selling at 220, that is starting to be an interesting trade. Buyers at 200 is definitely showing strong demand for titanium carbide. Are we talking a massive sell opportunity? No, not yet. I would call 250 for that, but we are finally, I think, touching on a slightly above average price for titanium carbide. Tungsten carbide is basically flat at 225, so here again, unless you see buyers at 175, it's nowhere near a nice buy opportunity. And peaks 250 to 275, I would wait for that before actually selling. So still in the in-between period here, and decently flat, just like with crystalline carbonate, decently flat. Not willing to break out. The first one to finally do so is titanium carbide. Next up, the metamaterials. We've got photonic metamaterials trying to stay above 17.5 thousand disc, but just not really succeeding in that. So we're talking 17,300 for the sellers, less than 16,000 for the buyers. Try and make that happen on the chart. That is pretty low. Yeah, if you are looking for a buy, I would say photonic metamaterials is something to consider. It's not a 1 year low just yet, but it's definitely under pressure and lacking demand. We can see that from that massive margin, 1,400 disc. That's quite a lot for this good. That's almost 10% margin between sellers and buyers. Plasmonic metamaterials also clearly under pressure. Let's see how close to 17,500 we are for the buyers. Still a bit off, so a bit early, but again, these metamaterials under pressure, so keep an eye on them if you're looking for a buy opportunity. We have non-linear metamaterials next. Same thing here. Look at those dips. 20k is definitely a buy opportunity. It's still 21,000, but 22,000 for the sellers, 1,000 margin, 5%, not that great, but you can again tell on the chart that there is a lot of pressure on the metamaterials. So if you do keep a close eye on them, I think at some point you might spot the right buy opportunity. Terahertz metamaterials is a bit different. Did go back up to 25k. Is under pressure, but it's basically between the low point and the midpoint here. 23,000 for the sellers is still respectable. 21,700 for the buyers is low, below average for sure, but nowhere near a pronounced buy opportunity. For the other advanced move materials, we've got a slight uptick in fermionic condensates on higher volumes. So here, I think that people did try to take advantage of prices, let's say below 90,000, maybe even close to 85,000 disc here. Still 88,700 for the buyers, 94,000 for the sellers though, so a slight uptick, obviously a bit of an increase in demand. I think it's investors taking positions personally. Ferrogel staying flat above 45,000 discs, so for me that's, look at that lack of margin here, 44,000, 45,400, and staying, right dead in the middle of the chart, so that's a no for me. Fullerite next, going back up to the middle of the chart, so slightly above average at this point, 1,200 almost for the sellers and 1,100 for the buyers. You could have bought these for like 900 disc, that is decent, you could consider this a small sell opportunity. For me personally, it's still a bit too early. Hypersynaptic fibers, that's a nice dive down again to 11,500 or something like that. 11,700 for the sellers, 11,350 for the buyers. Lack of margin quite pronounced, but we are obviously below the last 8-9 months of the chart here. If you want to take a bit of a risk, I think you could try to buy some hypersynaptic fibers. Nanotransmitters, bit of a bump up to 5,500, basically back on average, so not too much to say there. 5,400 for the sellers, 5,300. Again, lack of margin between these two for me is an indication that it's still a bit too early to sell, because it's not like supply is completely drying up or anything like that, but it's definitely too late to buy. Phenolic composites staying below average, under pressure, but I'd call 2,000 the bottom to look out for. 2,150, getting close to that. So again, for your consideration, if you're looking at the last 7-8 months, we're definitely at the low point. If you're looking at the whole year, there's still some margin to drop lower, potentially. And then ceramic fibers, a bit below average, but obviously that bottom of 400 in November late October, early November was a nice little opportunity to grab some of these. You could sell them at around 500 ISK at the moment. Yep, 512, 513, but a buy opportunity or an actual nice sell opportunity, not just yet. It would be nice if we could get closer to 600, which we did right after the buy opportunity, by the way. So here we are again a bit below average, nowhere near an interesting price to either sell or buy, in my opinion. So a couple of buy opportunities and one very interesting first carbide that actually seems to be breaking out to an above average price. But other than that, unfortunately, an in-between week yet again for Moon Materials. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships at 30.25. Like that. I think with the lack of movement really, or the lack of any massive disruptions in advanced Moon Materials, that this is going to be more of the same. But yeah, Aries dropping to a 1-year low point. You can also see these flat daily data points does indicate that it's basically one party dominating the price here. 28 million for the sellers. That's basically it. That's where you're getting your Aries at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Look at that. 26.8 million. Yeah, actually some buyers are grabbing them for less than 25 million. So it's gonna be difficult to do, but you might potentially grab some really cheap Aries here for less than 25 million. A buy opportunity, absolutely. Look at this entire chart. Basilisk also dipping to a 1-year low point here, landing just above 200 million ISK, 220 for the sellers, 194.4 for the buyers, the daily average. So selling 220, are they always winning out? Well, look at that, a couple days ago, 210. Here to 10. So no, you are actually able to grab Basilisk at around 195 or less than that. I wouldn't buy a dozen of them, but for one cheap Basilisk, this is a very interesting chart. We are yet again below everything. I thought we'd stay to a below average price, but some of them are in an interesting buy order territory. This is more the pattern that I was expecting. Cerberus, you can clearly see that we went to 200 million before. We are under pressure. We are definitely below average, but we're not at the 200 million yet. 240 for the sellers, 230 for the buyers. That is a below average Cerberus, but still a reasonable price. The Crow next, a bit more in that pattern again here as well. November crashed to 27.5, still selling for 35, buyers at 27 million. The average of these two, I think both of it's still possible to sell and to buy at the price that we're seeing here, because the average is in between the two, and so as a result, yeah, a bit below average, but nothing too crazy. Guardian, same thing again, lovely, 200 million here. That was a very pronounced nice buy opportunity. We're still buying at 213, so it's still too early to say that again about the Guardian. The Heretic, that is interesting, right? Definitely dipping to the low points for the 5-day moving average, breaking 70 million, and it's a complete lack of demand, so you can try to grab some of these for less than 60 million. Do I have one? No, I just gave up on buying an interdictor, basically. Okay, back to the Heretic. So this does look quite interesting. Again, just like with the Basilisk here, potentially you could try to grab a very cheap Heretic, but look at the volumes that are being traded every day. It's not a lot. I would again be very cautious with the amount that I would buy. The Hound is slowly edging back to 30 million ISK. So here we have that same pattern. October, November dips to 25, now selling for 29.7, buyers at 27, so below average but not at the bottom yet. Ishtar though, ooh, that's a breakout to less than 230 million, 1-year low point. If the buyers, yep, 212 for the buyers here. Very, very cheap Ishtars. Incredible ship, by the way. If look also at the volumes, 100 a day, that's tradable. If I would have to choose one so far, I would try to grab an Ishtar for like less than 215. I think that would be a pretty good price. And look at the potentials here, 300 million can definitely be achieved. Manticore next, just coming off of a 1-year low point, went as low as 28.2 on the chart, is back at 31. So here 29 million, 31.4 for the sellers. Below average for sure, but not at the bottom anymore. Munin next, same thing, although Playing, it's a bit trickier here for the Munin. Went to 220, now selling for 238. Buyers at 212 still. That's still really cheap actually. 212. Let's see if we can get something close to that. Yeah, 220. That's no, 210 right here. So 212. You are still buying pretty much below the entire chart for the year. That's not bad. And then the Munin, volume-wise, not that great. We gotta be honest here. It might be a doctrine in the Imperium, but it's not that great in Cheetah. So again, this is something, maybe I'd buy one Munin. If I'd risk it, I'd still prefer the Ishtar though. Look at that chart and look at the volumes. Yeah, it'd still be an Ishtar for me. Next up, we've got the Nemesis. After breaking 24 million ISK, bouncing back, but not reaching an above average price anymore. 28 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Oneros, ooh, 1 year low. How close to 150 are the buyers? 140 for the buyers. That is obviously a 1 year low point again for the Oneros. Very interesting, but again, I'm gonna keep that caution up and coming here. Volumes, not great, not great. Don't buy, don't put up this. I think that's actually a bad idea to try and grab 20 Oneros. Unless you get a lot of patience, then sure you could, but I would stay smaller in volumes. Purifiers back up a little bit, but still below average. Look at that, should be around 35 million, selling for 32. 29 for the buyers. Then the Saber, I tried to grab that, but I was a bit too aggressive on the low end of the price, so I never managed to do that. Is now back to maybe even a slightly above average price. 76 million for the sellers, 72 for the buyers. Unfortunately here, nowhere near a buy opportunity. You could have bought these for, let's say, 68 million. Well, actually, I tried to grab them. No, I think I tried to grab below 65, so I was very aggressive there. But 68 to 76, it's a small trade that you could consider at this point. We're definitely seeing data points above average here all of a sudden. Scimitar is again up a little bit as well, but below average for sure. Stiletto up and again at or slightly below average. So very interesting actually, to my surprise. An interesting week in Tech 2 because we actually have some nice buy opportunities. We're talking Ishtar, my favorite by far. Look at this chart. We're talking not Cerberus but Basilisk, yes. Ares, yes. 1 year low points, all of these, and pretty decent margin, not a lot of demand for these ships. I'm seeing some buy opportunities here, but I have to keep cautioning you guys here. Don't go crazy with the volumes because you might end up in trouble if you do. Next up, the Tech 3 ships coming in at 37.40. There we go. Let's start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor. We're seeing that same pattern again where we're, I would say, still a below average, but only by a touch and nowhere near the bottoms. But for the Tech 3 ships it's been quite different because throughout the summer we had this oversupply that sometimes hit, was never like across the board. But here we are basically, I think, as long as we don't see crazy numbers in the volumes, a bit more here all of a sudden with 73, but nothing too crazy. 38 million for the sellers, 37 million for the buyers. We are basically at a normal price for these ships and very difficult to make active trades considering the situation. The Hecate is basically just trying to get just below 40 million ISK, 40 for the sellers, 37, 38 for the buyers, and again the volumes here 41, 22, 25. This is nothing crazy, the market can handle that. The Jackdaw is also landing at 40 million, so we're talking 40 million for the sellers, 36.5 million for the buyers. A bit more in volumes, but as long as we're not seeing 2, 3, 400 in a single sell order, I think we're good. Here is 161. I'm seeing slightly increased volumes, so we could see slightly decreased prices, but nothing really tells me anything of oversupply at this point. Zweppel did jump up to 45 million, now landing at 40 million. Almost 41 for the sellers, 38 for the buyers. And again, look at this latest sell orders here. This is nothing crazy. We still have a little bit of a backlog here with 68 and 83, but down here we're not seeing hundreds of them. So for the advanced destroyers, we are talking 40 million on average. Let's call that the average price for now. And for the year, it's a bit tricky to call it that, but let's call that the normal price. It seems to be, because right now, volumes-wise, everything seems to be pretty much balanced out for the tactical destroyers. Now I think we'll see a bit more motion in some of the cruisers. Here is the Legion that is landing at 160 million ISK, 170 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers. Bit of pressure here. You do see that we have some more volatility in the tactical cruiser market. Volume wise, basically you've got 32 in one seller, and the rest feels like it might even be a bit low. If like a Nullstick needs to replace a fleet, you're just gonna have to grab lots of stuff and bump the price up to 182. So here I'm seeing still decent prices, but the availability might be tricky. The Loki also stabilizing at the current price, so we're talking 223 million for the sellers, 205 million for the buyers. By far the most popular cruiser at the moment. But look at the volumes, lots of 5s, 27, one with 23, but that's at 230 million. So here again, availability not great in the cruisers. Next up, we have the Proteus that is also flat at just below 180. Actually just above 170. 172 million for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. But again, just one of 16, and that's it. So is it really that with the end of Hard Knocks supremacy in wormhole space that there are now problems with all the farming, all the grinding, and that supplies aren't coming there? That is interesting. Definitely something to keep in mind. And for the Tengu, for instance, you can see that the Tengu all of a sudden is a bit more popular, volumes up, and we are seeing prices 207 million, bringing it in line with the Loki almost, which, I mean, look at where it comes from, 150 most of the year. That's a pretty crazy situation. 207 for the sellers, 202 for the buyers, and look at the volumes again, nothing crazy. And then these here in the last 24 hours, that's this whole front page, basically trying to take advantage of these higher prices. Are we seeing a volume spike? We are seeing a volume spike. So here exactly what I was talking about, I think happens in the Tengu. A large enough group said, we need Tengus, so we're gonna grab them no matter where, or they tell their members, go grab them no matter where you can. And that means in Cheetah, all of a sudden, yeah, you get this price spike in a couple of weeks from 170 to 207 million ISK. Availability feels a bit better, but it's all fresh, so it's all people seeing that opportunity and just dropping some Tengus on the market, which means that it is going to dry up a little bit of the fresh supply here in the Loki. Look at that, nothing in the last couple of weeks. The Legion, yeah, couple here, but really people aren't bringing lots of fresh cruisers to the market at the moment, and that is very interesting, a very unusual situation. This does mean that, in my opinion, you could even look at some of these downtrends, slight downtrends in the Legion, for instance, as perhaps even slight buy opportunities, but yeah. And even then, it's gonna be right. You can buy a Legion for less than 160 million. That's still here on the chart. That's not bad. That's below average. And if you look at what's happening on the Tengu here, for instance, it might be okay to actually not wait for a 1-year bottom at this point, especially in the cruisers, to try to make some moves. I've not been willing to trade in the cruisers, because for a long time here with this, we actually had hundreds of these cruisers. Let's say the first half of the year, we actually had that oversupply, hundreds of cruisers on the market, obvious market manipulation. At this point, it's a bit trickier to say that that's exactly what's happening, and we are seeing volumes that make spikes very much possible, in my opinion. So kind of weird, but very interesting for the Tech 3 cruiser market here. And the destroyer market, I think, is still in an okay situation. For the extra product, I'm going to go over the faction frigates. So that's going to be at 44 minutes. like that. We're gonna take a look at those, and then I'll also take a quick look at the ticker, at stuff that I bought, because I did buy some stuff. So, or try to buy. No, actually, yeah, I bought everything that I put up. So let us go. Ships, frigates. Then we've got faction frigates. There we go. We'll start with the pirate factions. Here we have the Astero definitely trading below average. Buyers coming in at 53 million. That is pretty much below the entire chart. Is this an actual buy opportunity? Perhaps, but it's not super pronounced, I would say. The Cruer, that is more pronounced. 1 year low point, buyers coming in at 40 million ISK. That is a buy opportunity for the Cruer for sure. The Daredevil next, also under pressure, below average, but definitely nowhere near the 60 million that we could have grabbed these at. 75 to 72 million. That is, well, if you look at the entire chart, might actually be around average at this point. Very interesting also to see this massive volume spike here all of a sudden. The Dramiel, 45 million. Normal price, not much to say here. 41 million for the buyers, 47 million for the sellers. It's basically a decently healthy margin, more than 10%, and a flat price. It's basically where it's supposed to be. I'd say the Garmer, same thing, bit of volatility, perhaps slightly below average. Buyers are at 47 million, 52 for the sellers. Here is basically, I think, sellers that have dropped a couple more. This can then go up towards 55 million, as you can see on this chart. Nothing too special. Succubus, 1 year high point. So Sancha Exploration, Succubus Blueprint potentially. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but 75 million, that is a great price. Definitely nice to sell those if you can. And then the Worm, dropping off quite sharply, heading to less than 55 million. Buyers coming in at 51.5. If this has more momentum, then I would say keep one eye on the Worm, and wait for buyers below 50 million. Try to grab a couple. I don't think you will regret that. So pirate factions, bit of a mixed picture. Lots of them are around average and okay, but the Worm, keep an eye on it. The Cruer is at a 1 year low point, and then the Succubus is at a 1 year high point. Definitely a great time to sell those. So you get plenty of options at this point, I think, in the pirate factions. Let's take a look at the navy factions next. Here we've got the Caldari Navy Hookbill. That basically, looking at this entire spike, 15 million, feels like we are dead set in the middle. So nothing too nice here. Federation Navy Comet, bit of an increase in price here to 15 million, but basically coming from below average to 13 million already, still staying below average. Imperial Navy Slicer, maybe a touch above average here, 15 million, let's call that the average, selling for 17, but not enough volatility to be that great. Republic Fleet Firetail, crawling out of the hole in the last couple of months, around average, below average, 14 million. Not great availability. This might be primed for a spike if the Republic loses in faction warfare. Not enough LP, not enough supply. This might be primed for big sell, but it's 84, 20, 10, 50. It's not going to be that easy to materialize if you look at the trade volumes. Crucifier Navy issue, super flat. Griffin Navy issue, very flat, around average as well. Man, I'm surprised we're not seeing the same interesting patterns that we're seeing in the battleships and the cruisers. So next week, battleships. Writing that down, definitely something to check, but here again, Molus at the lower end, but nothing too special. And then the Vigil also definitely a bit below average, but pretty flat. So quite surprised by this. I would say Navy faction frigates will be very interesting to keep an eye out for real situations in faction warfare. I do think that if Caldari or Galente are completely crushed, they're completely driven back in the opposite, is at their highest tier, that we will see an impact on this, something like that. But other than that, right now, very difficult to make trades in. I would definitely prefer the pirate faction frigates at the moment if I'd have to spend or try to make some ISK on the trades. Right here, it's not the case in cruisers and battleships. I think those have a bit more momentum going behind them and you get more trade potential there. But yeah, that's it for the faction. Frigs, I'm quite surprised. Navy faction, not that interesting. Pirate factions look a bit better. So let's move on to the ticker here, and we'll quickly go over the investments that I'm holding at the moment. So we've got construction blocks that I bought for less than 10,000 ISK. Now it's up to 10,400 for the buyers, 11,000 for the sellers. Obviously, we're gonna wait for that a little bit. Consumer electronics I bought for 10,700. Oh, apparently I made my move already. Too early. Again, that does seem to be a pattern for me, so I might want to lower my average by trying to grab, let's say, 10,200. I could then make the average, if I buy the same volumes, towards 10,400, something like that should be doable. So perhaps we'll do it, but I pulled the trigger on the downtrend here, and I bought below 11,000 ISK. So that's still great, I think, on this entire chart, and we can sell if we see that come back, obviously. And sellers, by the way, already at 12,000 ISK. That's an incredible margin, basically. Crystalline carbonite I bought at 146, so that's obviously pretty good. I'm still holding on to that. I'm gonna wait for like 200 or something like that before I actually sell it. It's up to 171. I could take a bit of profit if I want to. Again, I'll have some patience. Then the new stuff here are the isotopes. I bought at 565. Bars are now at 580. Sellers at 624. I do think that this is crazy low, and that we will see a change in this at some point. I may need a lot of patience, but that is primed. So I bought a hound at 25.2, now selling for 29.7. Honestly, we keep checking this every week. Anyway, I'm gonna wait for Nullsec to explode, and I'm gonna wait for 35-40 million. It is possible. I'm gonna be patient with these investments. Hydrogen isotopes bought for 635, 622 now, so a bit too early, but I think that this is an okay price to hold some stocks at. If you look at this entire chart, 1 year low point made too much sense not to pull the trigger. Bought a Manticore at 28 million, or a couple Manticores I think it is, at 27.9, now selling for 31. Again, I'm gonna wait for an actual spike, but I'm ready for that. Nemesis 24.5, so bought less below 25 million. I think it makes too much sense not to do that now at 28. Yeah, again, too early, but I am ready for the stealth bombers. Nitrogen isotope bought at 660. Now buying at 630, so maybe a bit too early again. But if you look at this chart, 660, that's bound to be okay in my opinion. Nuclear reactors bought at less than 90,000 ISK here. That's still definitely in a bit of a crazy situation, but again, we check this every week, so I think I'll have an opportunity. And then finally strontium, which is like a super old investment that I'm still holding on to. I'm not even sure if this average is right, and now selling for 2,300. I could sell now and basically get rid of that one, but I'm going to keep it in here, I think, just to remind myself that I make big mistakes as well, because that is something that I apparently bought on a downtrend, maybe even here, something like that, at 2,300 ISK, and look at the mistake I make. It went as low as 1,500 ISK. So it's not like I've got the crystal ball, like I know the future. This is all still a bit gambling for me as well, but these are the investments that I have made. So all of these goods are ready for me in Jita to sell whenever I see the opportunity, and that's what ETH is for me personally. You know, to try and make that happen. It's gonna be my part of trading in ETH Online. I hope it helps for you guys as well. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.